Be strong and get healthy. Stretch. Feel great about yourself and have some fun. It's time for you. Fitness is the key to your future. Don't get locked out. Take the challenge. Commit to be fit. At the beginning of each new year, many of us try to make changes or improvements on ourselves. Some of us want to change something about our physical appearance, or maybe start a new career path, or kick a habit. You know, it can be anything. And sometimes we reach our goals and other times we don't. But these are called making resolutions. And today I have a special guest on the show. He's going to explain to us what addiction is and how the addicted brain works. So I'd like to introduce to you Paul Tripoli.
Susie, a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Paul, for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Susie and I go way back. We met each other in the fitness industry probably, I want to date us here, probably 28 years ago.
I would say, but I knew you before then. I don't think you knew me, but because you are younger than I am. But I used to see you in church when we were kids.
Wonderful.
Your whole family lined up in the church, but...
You know, that all ties in when you talk about addictions, when you talk about New Year's resolutions, that sometimes for people, I'm going to segue right in, that when they make a resolution, sometimes they go back to their roots, like church and foundations. And I think that's an important piece of this topic this morning, to understand a person's foundations and where they come from.
Well, that's a good point.
But for me, if I may, I'll give a little bit of my background.
I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Well, by training, I'm a clinical social worker, and I went to school at Pitt and West Virginia University, and I'm licensed as a clinical social worker, and I have a state license in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And as well, I've recently been certified as an addictions counselor, which was a real feather in my cap and something that I worked hard for. I saw that in private practice, which I have a private practice in Washington, PA, where I've worked now for, probably the better part of 20 years. In the private practice, I've seen people with a variety of mental issues, depression, anxiety. Those are the typical two that I treat. But I started to see maybe 15 years ago more people coming in with addictions. And this was curious to me because at first in the field we would treat addiction and mental health as separate issues. And then as the years have progressed, I've seen more and more people with addiction and mental health, and now the two are virtually inseparable.
Well, when you say addiction, is it substance or can it be behavioral? Like, what are people addicted to?
Well, that is really a great question, because you can be addicted to darn near anything. So what I try to do is separate them from a healthy addiction to an unhealthy addiction.
So you can have healthy addictions too?
You sure can.
Because I think I do.
Like working out. I think you do too, and yeah. I know I do as well. It really is a chemical issue going on in the brain, and that's where addiction comes from mostly. While it's a behavioral issue, somebody might take a drink or somebody might smoke pot, and believe me, these are not endorsements for any of that behavior. But there's a chemical reaction to the chemistry that we bring into our body. And our bodies as well then release an amount of chemistry so that the body can combat illness or fatigue. And our internal chemistry is designed to stimulate us. And then we also have chemistry that helps bring us back to normal.
Well, how do people become addicted? Is it hereditary, or are you saying are they born with certain aspects that would make them become addicted people, or is it how does that happen, where people become addicted?
People can become addicted. Let's talk specifically about drugs and alcohol then. Addiction can happen to anyone. Nobody that I've ever met in the years of doing this now had started out to become addicted. Not one person. Mm-hmm. They may have smoked or drank because It was something that their friends did. It was something that was familiar to their family. I've known stories of people that started smoking pot and it was given to them by their parents who said, in effect, I don't want you doing it out there. As long as you do it here, then that way there's a certain amount of control. But unfortunately, that's typically the green light to just go ahead and smoke some more. And so what happens in addiction is that people are genetically and can be genetically predestined to become an addict. For most people, if they were to take a drink of alcohol, for example, they might end up feeling a little bit of a buzz, if you will, but after a couple drinks, they'll have a certain stop point. But in the brain in the addict, it begins to release dopamine, and that is our number one chemical for pleasure. And when they drink alcohol, they get a certain amount of pleasure release in the stimulation of dopamine. That also happens with drugs, hardcore drugs, opioids, and even pills that are taken normally for pain can cause the stimulation of dopamine in the addict's brain.
So are you saying that if the brain isn't a brain of an addict, then it doesn't produce dopamine? Or like, why do some people pick up a drink, like once a month or something, and they can not drink, most of the time, and then some people take one drink and then they're off, they're addicted and they're...
I think in answer to that question, there's probably 3 or 4 factors that weigh in. Let's go back to a typical teenager. And let's face it, in today's society, I think it's very difficult to be a teen. And I think even more so to be a teen girl, because the pressure on the teenage girl to be the supermodel, to be fit, to be the academic, to have many, many friends, I think there's tremendous pressure on our teens today. And again, I have a particularly soft spot for teen girls as I get to see a lot of the struggles they go through. Teen boys, they struggle as well too, but teen boys tend to have other outlets that I think that they're able to channel off some of their anxieties through. And even though I don't like to promote video games, but it is a way of carrying people away from some of their issues at the time.
And boys are more prone to play video games, aren't they?
I think so.
I think.
I think. But the teen girl, they are really being bombarded, and especially when you consider their maturation, their height and weight growth that they go through in those early years of junior high and high school. I think that statistically they'll achieve 80% of their height and weight growth between age 12 and age 18. And that's a gigantic chemical storm going on in the body as well.
And then all the pressure from the media to look a certain way and to be a certain way.
Incredible amount of pressure. So if I'm a teen girl or a teen guy and I have a lot of pressure, now I'm going through the changes in my body. Academically, I'm finding out that maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was, or there's a pressure to remain the straight A student. Also, the angst that teens always have with their parents. It's a very confusing time. So a teen is looking for relief and release, and that's the perfect opportunity for them to experiment with drugs. And the drugs do the intended job. They give a lift, and the person feels euphoric, relieved for a time. And now, game on. And if I feel good and I smoke pot, and all my friends are telling me it's all natural, the Indians smoked it, and I don't know any of that to be true, and that's not a slam on Native Americans, not at all. It's just this is the talk that I hear all the time.
Well, why do some teens that are going through problems get addicted and then others don't? Is there how does the addicted brain work? How does it catch people? How does that happen? Like, I was a cigarette smoker, and it was really hard for me to quit. So I had to replace it with working out. So the day after I stopped smoking, I started lifting weights. And that helped me, but I replaced it with another addiction.
But that's a healthier one. I was a drinker before, and anybody that comes into my office, and I've always been open about that because it was something that I wasn't proud of at the time, but to be able to overcome alcohol consumption like I was consuming it in vast amounts when I was younger, I replaced that now, and I drink a lot of water, and you'll see that I have a coffee cup, and I maybe even occasionally might have a small Red Bull, but I'm still consuming. But it's a healthy consumption, very limited on the coffee and Red Bulls, but a lot of water.
A lot of water. Well, I drank for a short time. I had a thyroid problem that caused all the skin to fall off the ends of my fingers, so I was in a lot of pain, and they couldn't figure out what it was for a while, so I started drinking to take the pain away. But I feel the same way you did. I was ashamed that at that time that I was drinking, but yet it took the pain away from my hands enough for me to fall asleep. But once, they found out what it was and I was able to get medication for my thyroid, I didn't crave that anymore. But I don't drink at all anymore because it scares me. Alcohol scares me. And I know there's somebody out there today that's watching this show that's having a problem with addiction. And just stay tuned. Keep listening because, Paul's been through it and he knows the professional side of it. And I've been through it with cigarettes and alcohol. And it is, you do feel bad about it, but after it's over and you've gone through it, like you said, you feel really good that you were able to get through that part of your life.
Treatment is really the key. So let's go back to the young teen.
Okay.
Here they are in that whirlwind of their life, confusion, angst with the parents, pressure from their society that they're in, and it's 24/7, and we know that because after they leave school, it's still following them, whatever happened in school. It's on Facebook.
The social media, it's horrendous.
It never ends. The cell phone, Twitter, IMs, Facebook, email accounts, it's phenomenal the amount of information that gets passed around, and most of it, of course, can be gossip and slander. And so for a young person going through this kind of an assault, which it is an assault to their senses, they want relief. In the brain, the pleasure receptors are formed first. They're formed first, but that part of our brain that says don't do, it's the stop part, the stop mechanism, isn't fully intact. And so if I'm needing to derive pleasure because I don't feel good, and I fire up those pleasure receptors with drinking alcohol or smoking pot or taking drugs, again, as I said before, game on. What's not to like in the young brain?
Yeah.
Again, not an endorsement, but let's understand the mechanism. And so there can be a genetic component to the addiction, but let's take it simply from a behavioral standpoint. That person liked the effect, they felt better for a time, and the brain says, go ahead and do it again. That's the addiction.
And that's hard too. So how do you treat addiction? It seems I was able to quit smoking on my own, so I'm not sure that I feel that I was addicted, but that was 32 years ago, and I don't know that cigarettes were as addicting as they are today. I hear that they're even more addicting today. I don't know, but
I think what scares me the most is the amount of positive messages that drugs and alcohol get every day. Now, I read some statistic, and I can't quote it, that on the average week, there's 10,000 positive messages referring to drugs and alcohol through the media. And I don't remember what measure they had used to come up with that number, but let's say that that number is true or partially true. That means our teens are hearing positive messages about doing drugs. Take in the 1960s when marijuana really was, I think, the new craze coming out of the 50s and the free love movement. But still, it wasn't as totally acceptable or commonplace as it is now. Today in the schools, if you don't smoke pot or don't give a positive reference to drugs, you're outcast.
Really?
You're looked as the oddball.
that's what you're seeing in school now?
That is statistically true, and that is the commonplace. There is, again, this thought that because marijuana has been legalized, quote unquote legalized, that it now makes it okay. And we've seen that in alcohol. But just because it's legal doesn't make it good. And so the legalization of marijuana is specifically for medical use, and that's in 20 states now. But it gives the impression that pretty soon this will be legalized in all states, and that makes it okay to do. And it does not.
Well, what's the difference? I wanted to ask you, is there a difference between addiction and habit?
A habit is something that a person will do out of, I think, a behavioral part of their life. Just by habit, I get up and I brush my teeth. By habit, I take a shower. And so habit is something that's built into a routine. And it is true, by habit, some people might drink or they might smoke. But an addiction is where that person, in spite of evidence to the contrary, will continue to use the substance of choice. When they've incurred issues related to their health, when there's issues related to, say, school attendance, when they've had issues with their parents, or that they've probably had a legal issue, that person is having a drug addiction because they still use, in spite of mounting evidence that says this is consequential. I shouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. And that's the nature of addiction. What's even more troubling is after a person gets started, and let's take opioids, for example, pain pills, heroin, which again, back in the 50s and 60s, that was for the hardcore drug addicts.
Oh, yeah.
But nowadays, it's designer. And that's very frightening. And you're taking a group of people that are very new into the drug world, and heroin's more available, it's cheap, and these newbies in the field of drugs are using heroin with alarming results, disastrous results. The governor of New Hampshire declared heroin an epidemic in his state. I saw that on USA Today. Anyway, so when somebody starts using, they can immediately become addicted. And again, nobody that I know of starts out to become addicted. But addiction now is that you have to use in order to feel normal. And the hardcore addict that's really addicted has to use drugs so that they don't get sick. The pleasure part is over.
So that's pretty much the definition then. Once you're addicted, you have to use the substance so that you can just have a normal life.
That's exactly right.
Even like cigarettes.
Exactly.
You know, they're legal, but I really had a hard time quitting. You know, I'll never smoke another one because I think, you know, you smoke one and then you're gone.
Think of the association that a person can make with a cigarette. They might say, I'm stressed out, I need a cigarette. So now they've already coupled stress relief with cigarette. Mm-hmm. And there's no substance in cigarettes that are known to reduce stress. But because of that mechanism that we've decided, mm-hmm. that relationship with cigarettes, well, that's what it does.
So what do we do, Paul?
Is that our cue? When the sign comes down, the show is over?
It's a sign. We just got a sign. So what do we do, Paul, with addiction? Like what should people do? They're watching the show today and they're beating themselves up. I know they are. People that keep, they make these goals and then they can't attain the goal and they feel bad. They feel badly, and I want them to know that they're not bad people. It's that they have an addiction and they need to get help so that they can be on the road to health again and fitness.
Well, I agree that people do feel badly about the addiction, but I think you're absolutely right. I have met great people with bad habits, mm-hmm. and I've never really met a bad person yet. I truly have not. I've just met people with bad habits. The habit of negative thinking, the habit of addiction. So for anybody out there who's having a problem with drugs, alcohol, or feels that they need to talk, I'm certainly available. There's a number of counselors available in your area. You can even look up counselors online. There's a new movement afoot called telepsychiatry, where medical professionals can be available to you actually through the internet. So there's a number of ways that anybody can reach out and get a hold of a therapist or an addictions counselor, or even go to your clergy. And if you're not even comfortable doing that, start with a good friend. For anybody that might want to talk to me, I'd like to give them my cell phone number. I can be reached anytime at 724-747-9408. Paul Tripoli. I'm an addictions counselor and a licensed clinical social worker. I'm glad to talk to people. I'm busy. I'm very busy. I'm not trying to generate referrals, but I will be glad to refer you to someone else or to direct you in another direction away from addiction.
Paul, this is really important because my life focuses on several things, and one of the main things is fitness. But why I wanted you to come on the show today at the beginning of the year, because I know this is the time of year that people are trying to make changes and they're having a hard time. And it just might be they need to get motivated. But I'm just hoping that we reach someone today that really needs to hear that message. They need to get up, they need to take care of themselves, because fitness is not just about your body. It's mind and body.
It really is. I love the mental lift that I get from exercising. And you know that I've had a long history of exercise and I enjoy it. My wife and I engage in regular exercise. We did take a couple months off to regroup, but that release that you get from exercise and that mental relief is just so uplifting. And then, of course, the physical and the transformation of the body. So I'd like to talk some more about that in transformation and how people can set resolutions and then set the steps to achieve the resolution.
Well, let's talk about, let's mention how we came about doing this show.
Well, Susie and I are very synergistic. I have a great faith in God. My heart is with Jesus Christ. And I was saying to Susie that in one of my New Year's resolutions that I had written down 3 or 4 things that I intended to do, including media, blogs, website, and appearances on media.
And at the same time, on the other side of town, without knowing that you had just written down you wanted to get involved in media, I called my best friend in Idaho, all the way across the United States, and said, who do you think we should have on the show for the first show of the year? And I said, I'm thinking Paul Tripoli. And my friend Marcy Clark, your friend too, she said Paul would be an excellent choice because we want to talk about addictions and how to break addictions so that we can exercise and get the endorphins and all of that from exercise and not from drugs. And it was funny. Marcy had a hard time finding your phone number. It took her a little bit. She had to go through her old phone and she found it. Called me, I called you, and you had just written down media. And how's that work, Paul?
I really feel that that's really a godly connection, that people that are really out to be their best are really paying reverence to God who created us. And so that's a common, actually, well, maybe it's not as common, but it's called manifesting, that you can draw to you whatever it is that you're really thinking about. And we've been told this time and again in the Bible and in other books that are out on the market today, that you can achieve whatever it is that you put your mind to. And so I put that out there. That's my goal. I'm going to be in the media more and do more social networking. And it doesn't surprise me that I got a call. It just surprised me who I got the call from. And so, but it was a welcome surprise and really such a great connection from so long ago. And then Marcy is our in-between there. I greatly appreciate her friendship too.
3,000 miles. I mean, we had a triangle going and then boom, there it was.
Well, thank goodness for cell phones too, though, and
yeah.
especially the old cell phones. So we'll have to be thankful for Marcy's old AT&T or whatever she had.
Well, actually, she gave it to her son, and it was in his room, so she had to go digging for it, and then she found it. But it was meant to be, and I know, like I said, I know there's somebody that's watching right now, and it's just going to make a light bulb go off on top of their head, and they're going to realize I'm not at fault. I am an addict. I need to reach out and I need to get help.
I think that the most important thing to remember is it is a disease. It's not your fault. Nobody, again, has started out to become an addict. It's a disease. It needs to be treated like a disease. And so please, for anybody out there that needs help, do what I suggested. Please go to a friend or a clergy or a counselor. There's a number of ways to find people. Again, I welcome your call.
Well, Paul, we're going to be wrapping it up here, and I want everyone to know that fitness is not just about the body. It's body and mind, and you have to take care of your mind. And we only have one life, and we want to do the best that we can. And I really appreciate you coming on today because we're just volunteers. We're all volunteers here. We don't get paid to do this. We have a passion, and we want to get the word out that it's all good.
It is all good. I love it. I love to watch people go through that process of change where they start to become who they were intended to be. And so I know you're in that same business, and I appreciate the blessing that you've brought to other people too.
Oh, Paul.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on the show, and I hope you'll come back because we need to continue this.
I'm not leaving.
Oh, you're not leaving? Okay, well, just keep the cameras rolling. We're going to stay.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Susie.
you, Paul. All right, well, that's our message for today. I hope you paid attention, and if you need to get a hold of Paul, his information will be at the end of the show. But as always, remember, just take care of yourself, get moving. I don't care what you're doing right now, but get moving, get up, get going, take the challenge, and commit to be fit.
Hey, bud.
Oh.
Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
It's a school night. With Gary and Todd?
Yeah?
Not sure about those two. I've been meaning to ask you. This is tougher than I thought. Is there any drinking going on in this crowd?
No?
I hope not, because alcohol can lead you to say things and do things that you really wish you hadn't. Isn't this what you're supposed to say?
I know.
So if any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't. I'd do anything to keep you safe.
Okay, I will.
I hope this is working.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you.
Ryan.
Yeah?
So start the conversation even before they're teenagers.
Good idea.
For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.